Hello, my dear players. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and today we'll be talking about adventuring guilds. A fun little idea to incorporate in your campaigns. I thoroughly recommend the concept. And we'll be talking about a few general things about adventuring guilds, and then we're going to head into a specific example and the specifics of that specific example. So, first thing is that adventuring guilds are super useful for for number one, justifying the party to be together. Because it's really easy through the lens of a guild to just justify, oh, y'all are going to have to work together for X reason. It's super easy for it to just have a guild do that when, assuming your players are joining it. Two, it also makes directing the plot incredibly easy because, obviously they get quests. They can just freely get quests from the guild on like a quest board, or maybe they're directly given it by a higher up. And anytime you want them to be like, pay attention to this thing that I care about as the DM, that I want you to care about, you can just have a handler at the guild tell them about it, or have a guildmate tell them about it as a peer, or whatever. It's just an easy excuse to feed the player's plot. So easy. And adventuring guilds offer a lot of very interesting questions. Like, what is the place of their adventuring guild in relation to the rest of the world? How powerful is the guild? Like, what is it like? Like, think about it in like the case of D&D, where adventurers in D&D can do some insane shit. Like, by the time they hit certain levels, it's crazy. So, if keeping that in mind, what the hell is a place where all of these people get together and work together like? What are these people like? How much power do they actually wield? How big are they? Are they international? Do they operate out of multiple countries? Are they stuck within one country? There's a lot of ways to do it. And one of my favorite kind of prompts to work with as an adventuring guild, and we'll get into a specific example of this, is the idea of essentially an international adventuring guild. One that is so influential and powerful that it threatens, like, their existence is scary to countries. Like that's my favorite way to toy with it. And that obviously leads into a lot of interesting plot where you have where there might be, a lot of different opinions about whether it's okay for a guild like that to exist. Oh, there's plenty of spellcasters there that can cast like 7th to 8th, like 6th to 9th level spells. That's terrifying. And that just like naturally leads to a lot of interesting, like, differences of opinion, lore disputes, and potentially plot even. Like, if you can build a plot around, oh, the other countries don't like the guild, we'll see what happens with that. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And the specific example that I have used for this is a group that in one setting I call the Wardens. And the Wardens are a little different in that they do function like an adventuring guild, but they don't necessarily behave like a traditional adventuring guild, mostly because of their international power and because of the way they started. Because basically in that setting, what had happened is that the concepts of like magic and monsters are fairly new. It's only in the past couple of years they've been a thing. It's essentially like an almost apocalyptic event happened, where at one time it was a normal medieval fantasy area. And then all of a sudden, magic and monsters started appearing, and it caused a lot of chaos and destruction. And it was a group of people who called themselves the Wardens that had figured out how to use magic and had figured out how to deal with monsters that had kind of helped tame the chaos and bring society back from the brink. And ever since then, the Wardens have just, over the past couple hundred years, have just continuously grown into a bigger and bigger group with more and more power. And it leads to this awkward scenario where, like, quite clearly the Wardens are powerful enough to, like, just destroy a country if they wanted to. Like, they could just do that. Like, if, like, the higher-ups and, like, everyone within the guild just agreed, we're going to take over a country, they couldn't be stopped, probably. Like, it was, like, they're that powerful at that point. So it leads to a lot of these, as I said before, a lot of interesting differences of opinions about them. Some people are perfectly okay with it. They think that if anyone's going to be responsible with such power, it would be the Wardens. They saved us before. Other people are like, well, since people are more used to magic and monsters, do we really need the Wardens anymore? Especially with how scary they are now. And also some people that just flat out hate the Wardens. They just hate the idea that one group can consolidate so much power and be so threatening. And just leads to, lots of interesting dynamics. And it's fun. And something else I did with the Wardens that kind of adds another layer to it that I think is pretty fun is that not only does it have basic adventuring stuff to it, where, like, you can join and be a basic adventurer, there's also other divisions to the Wardens that, if you prove yourself, you can join. And these divisions is that, like, the first division is, like, the exploration division. They're like the Rangers, like the class almost. And what they do is that they explore areas that other people aren't able to explore. Places that are incredibly dangerous because of magic or monsters, and they explore them and try to understand them and see if there's anything useful to them or whether people should just avoid it. And they apply this to other planes of existence as well, when they can go there. Those other planes. And they have the additional job of trying to figure out pragmatic engagements with different types of monsters, like how best to engage with a red dragon if should one appear, how best to deal with a bullet, should it be burrowing in the ground somewhere, and so on and so forth. They don't really seek to truly intellectually understand these monsters or the environments they go to, just to pragmatically understand how to navigate and deal with them, and then the actual intellectual understanding of the finer details and what to do with that is left to one of the other divisions, which segues me into talking about them, the research division, or the research and development, the R&D team, essentially. They will just, as the name implies, try to better understand magic, monsters, and even technologies on a deeper, more fundamental level, and see if there's any other applications for these things that can benefit the Wardens or society, or both. And yeah, there's not much else to say about them. And you might get the impression that the R&D team are kind of the weaklings of the three. It's not really true, really. Most of them are spellcasters and are physically lacking somewhat due to that, but most of them are pretty capable with magic. You don't get in the research division for nothing. And yes, and they also don't spend all their time in labs. They spend most of their free time in labs, but researchers will often go with explorers, the Rangers, to kind of get samples and better understand and help, kind of a feedback loop of helping them get pragmatic information and them helping them get more intellectual information. And it's a nice little feedback loop they got going on when things happen. And then the third group, the third division, is the enforcement division. The best way to think of that is almost like a fantasy FBI. It's the best way to think about them. When crimes reach reach a certain capacity or scale or danger to them that you can't really expect, like guards and whatnot, and general law enforcement in villages or in cities to actually do anything about it, they will involve themselves into the affairs to deal with them. So we're talking things like mages who've gone mad with power. We've got serial killers. We've got like bigger criminal organizations that outman like guards and stuff. Things like that. That is what the enforcement division will involve themselves into to deal with. And oftentimes, while it is not their job, enforcement division will also help the rangers and vice versa if like certain criminals are escaped into dangerous areas, or if certain specific people know where dangerous areas are and happen to be a criminal. Rangers and enforcers will often help each other in dealing with those situations. And on that note, researchers also oftentimes have to help enforcers with their crime-related things, because they essentially will act like a magical forensics almost. And in addition to that, the enforcers will kind of almost pay for that to see if there's anything about the criminals and what they're doing that might be relevant to any particular researcher's research. And you can kind of see here how each division, while being separate, are pretty much constantly in this loop of helping each other out and being on teams together, because you can almost always find a reason. And when you're talking about these more extreme situations, you can pretty regularly find scenarios in which they can all be helpful towards their own goals, thus creating a nice little symbiotic relationship within the guild. And also, due to how different each of these three motivations and ways of operating are, this leads to a lot of variety in what players can make up. Player may make up someone who just wants to be a generic adventurer and doesn't really want to go up into the higher divisions, but they also, depending on their motivations and what they want to do, they could be more specifically want to be a part of the enforcement division or something. They could want to be this be a part of this fantasy FBI to help put away the big criminals. Another player could, be like a wizard who wants access to the best research equipment possible, which is available in the Wardens, and thus want to join the research division. And you could also have a ranger or a druid who want kind of to be able to explore the most interesting, dangerous areas and be able to deal with and fight some of the most dangerous monsters, which the exploration division would allow them to do. And that's just like basic off the top of my head motivations that you could apply to these three divisions. But you could make up any number of more specific motivations that could relate to research, exploring, or enforcing law. And thus you have the recipe for a very diverse group of adventurers in the party that all can be very different from each other, yet still have a valid reason to stay together as a group and do things together. And this gives a lot of open-ended ideas for more kind of background, long-running things that could be happening up until they, come up. Like, if a player is acting, joins the enforcement division, it could be the case that in the background, as quests are going on, they're also working on some grand investigation where they're gathering clues, they're talking to witnesses, they're trying to figure out this really big, large-scale crime that maybe ties to their personal backstory or whatnot. And same thing goes with researchers, where they might have a big research project that they're trying to work on in the background as things are happening. And eventually, as with the investigation, it will come to a head sometimes and becomes the plot at the time. The explorers have probably the most difficulty trying to make this long-running thing, though. Although, I think it's pretty easy to think of, X amazing mythic location that they want to discover, and thus are constantly looking for clues and bits of information about how to get there and how to explore it. So you could build out something like that. And yeah, that's kind of how I've laid out the Adventuring Guild that I've made. But I could also see not an argument, but see the case for more specific guilds that are like larger scale and maybe have more specific things you could make an adventuring guild that essentially functions as a monster slaying guild. That could be interesting. You could have just thought of this. You could have an entire system of adventuring guilds across the world, where even though each guild is very different from one another, they're all constantly in contact with one another to share information when needed, and maybe there's competition. That actually could be a very interesting plot, where you have all the guilds of the world constantly some of them really trying to prove that they're the best adventurers. They have the best adventurers, or the best. Someone want to prove they have the best warriors of all adventurers. Someone want to they have the best explorers. Whatever. I just literally, as I'm recording this, I just thought about that and how that could be very interesting to employ as a plot of guilds competing with each other and going out of their way to do a lot of crazy shit in their competitions. That could be really fun, actually. I'll make a note of that. And if y'all have any ideas for any more specifically themed adventuring guilds that are more small scale, let me know. Put them in the comments. It'll be really fun. So since you've listened to the end, please like and subscribe and leave a comment for the algorithm, my dear friends. And I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.